In this video, we're going to show you how to remove and replace rear disc brakes on a Chevy Trax. Remove the wheel, 19mm socket. It's 5 lug. On the rear brakes of this car, this caliper is actually a spin-in type piston, so we have to open the bleeder screw. So you're going to take the dust boot off, 10mm wrench. We're going to break this free so that we can get the piston back smoothly and not reverse the fluid. Now that that's loosened up, I'm just going to snug it. So now we're going to undo the caliper bracket bolt in its 10mm socket or wrench. Once that's loose, just take it off by hand. There's a bottom and a top. We can take the top one out. Now with a screwdriver or pry bar, I'm just going to move it back and forth because the rust is holding it in there. It's pretty normal. There we go. So before I push that piston back, I'm going to open this bleeder screw. See those 2 notches? So you can use a pair of needle nose and twist it. You got to push and twist at the same time. Or if you have the tool that I have, it's going to mount in there like this. You're going to line that tool up with the 2 dots. There we go. We're looking for that piston to spin back. And it will bottom out. When it does, we want to try to keep those tabs at 12 and 6. So we'll back this off. See where the tabs are, because the pads, believe it or not, have a little dimple in them for it to sit in. Now the piston's back, we can tighten up that bleeder screw and stop the fluid from coming out. Just snug it. And now we can take that caliper bracket off. The caliper bracket mounting bolts are a 15mm socket or wrench. Break it free. The mounting bolts come from the factory with Loctite on the thread, so I'm going to clean that up and I'm going to apply a new coat when I go to reinstall it. So the pads are pretty rusted and they're frozen in the bracket, so I'm just going to take a screwdriver and just pry them off a little bit so I can hopefully not make too much of a mess here. There we go. All right, so now I took the caliper bracket, brought it over to the bench. I'm going to hammer out these pads because they're pretty frozen in there. Pay attention to, this is the inner part of the pad bracket, this is the inner pad, and that is where the actual pad indicator goes. Take your tins off because you get new ones with the hardware, and here's the sliders. So I like to do one at a time. Take the top slider pin out. I'm going to take that boot off. I'm going to look over, make sure it has no tears, no rips. It's in good shape. With silicone paste or caliper grease, first thing I'm going to do after I've examined that boot, I'm going to fill this with some nice silicone paste. I want to get it all in those inside little grooves. So every time that pin goes in and out, it stays lubricated. Add some to the top. I'm going to take a rag and I'm going to clean the old grease off. Check the pin out, make sure it's not scored up or has any rust on it that could inhibit it from sliding in and out. Looks good. Just add a light coat of new silicone paste. I'm going to put the boot on. On this particular model, you can tell that the inner boot has this little guide and the outside has these ridges on it. So you're just going to pop it down, make sure it seats, then take your pin, and I like to twist and push in at the same time. It gets that air out. That's what's pushing that pin back out, is air trapped in there. You'll hear the air. And there we go. And do the same to the other side. So now we're going to clean up the surface where the hardware tins seat, and you'll notice that rust builds up. And what happens when the water gets underneath there, it just kind of forms a rust with the steel, and it pushes the tins up. And that can stop the pads. As you saw, I had to take them out with a hammer. It squeezes them tight in there, and then that causes inadequate pad wear. Now I take some brake clean, and I'm just going to clean that up. Let that dry. See how, make sure all the rust is gone. I'm going to do the same to the other side. Take some new silicone paste. We're going to apply it to under where the tins mount, not on the top, just underneath, because we don't want the tins to rust or get swollen from the water. Line it up and snap it down on there. And do the same to the other side. You don't need heaps of it, just enough that it gets into the little corners and stops any water from forming. Okay, make sure they're seated good. And now we know that that's the outer pad and that's the inner pad because it has the indicator on it. Sometimes you can just start it on a side and stand it upright. Perfect. So we're going to remove the rotor from the hub, and it has a mounting bolt right here. It's a Torx bit. It's a T30. I'm going to take that right off. We're going to reuse it, so set it aside. Grab your rotor. So now we have to clean up this hub. And it's really in good shape, actually. There's not much rust here, but I'm going to use my little handheld wire brush. If it was really bad, I would take an air grinder to it. Not grinder, but a sanding pad. But I'm going to loosen it up with some brake clean, get some of that rust off. And then I'm just going to get right in here where the actual rotor seats. You want to make sure that's where there's no clobs of rust buildup. Now I'm going to take some anti-seize and I'm going to just spray this hub so the new rotor doesn't have any rust forming. I'm going to put the new rotor on backwards just so I can clean the surface with some brake clean. Get the oil surface. It's just like a coating for stock on the shelf. We got to line up that mounting bolt to the hub. Sits. We'll start it by hand. And we'll tighten it. That's the T30. So now it's mounted, we're going to clean the outside surface of the rotor. So now I have a clean bolt, mounting bolt, and I'm going to take my thread locker. I'm using medium strength. And I'm going to put some right there on the thread. Do the same to the other bolt. Line it up. Oh, I got that top started by hand so I can squeeze these pads in now. Make sure they don't fall out. Start the bottom bolt by hand. I'm going to get my electric ratchet and snug those up before I torque them. So this is a 15mm socket, and the torque is 74 foot-pounds. Now we can remount our caliper, take it off the hook. Slide it on. push those slide pins back. I'm going to snug it up by hand because, one, I can't get a socket in there. And it's only 21 foot-pounds is the torque on this. So I'd probably over-tighten it if I did it by hand or with electric or air tool. 10mm socket. I'm going to tighten the top one with the Torx, and I have to do the bottom one by hand. So basically, I'm just going to give it a nice quarter turn after it bottoms out. Now I'm going to go pump the brakes without the vehicle started so that I can get that piston to come out and seat, fill that cylinder up with brake fluid. Then I'll open that bleeder screw and just let it gravity bleed. Now that I've pumped the brake up, I'm going to open the bleeder screw. I have a catch basin underneath so you can catch the brake fluid as it drips out. I just want to check for air bubbles, make sure it's a solid stream before I tighten it up. All right, so now I've got no more air bubbles, so I'm going to snug it up, make sure it's tight, clean it with some brake clean. And then reinstall my dust boot right on that bleeder screw. Now we can reinstall the wheel. Put the lug nuts on by hand. I'm going to snug it up, but always in a star form pattern. I'm going to torque the wheels to factory spec. 19mm socket. The wheel torque is 100 foot-pounds. Always do it in a star pattern. Double check. And don't forget to check your brake fluid level and top it off if you need any. You can always undo the cover and read, and you'll see what type of fluid it takes. And it will say .3 or 4. And this one says 3. And you're going to want to fill it until it gets to the top line. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.